He came over and he shook my hand and he said, "You changed my life." He still gives me goosebumps to this day, dude. Like, and I'm like, what? And he's like, "You've changed my life."
So this is
like,
someone that you never met?
Never met this guy.
Came
he just said
straight up to you and just said, "You changed my life."
And if you'd have asked me 10 minutes before this happened, like, is the podcast a success? I'd be like, no one's listening to it. I mean, we're getting a couple of thousand downloads. It's like no one ever really reaches out. It just kind of ticks over. And I'm looking at him like, he must have got me mistaken, man, like someone else. And he said, "No, because I've lost 5 stone. You changed my life." From that, at that point, I was like, this means something now to people.
Welcome to Ride to Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. In the podcast, I explore cycling, global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. In this episode, we dive into the inspiring journey of Davi Birks, a trailblazer in the cycling and podcasting world. From his early days of bootstrapping a mountain bike distribution company to building the Ride Companion podcast and the TRC Media House, Davi is known for his candid approach and innovative thinking. So get ready for an engaging conversation filled with actionable insights, humor, and a dose of inspiration. And before we get into the podcast, this episode is brought to you by Bike Rent Manager, the world's best all-in-one bike rental software. If you're looking to streamline your operations, boost your revenue, and stay ahead of the competition, Bike Rent Manager is the only reliable and efficient system that improves customer experience and satisfaction. Whether you run a small rental shop or a global fleet, Bike Rent Manager has you covered. Learn more on their website, www.bikerentalmanager.com. Now, back to the show. Welcome, Davi, to Ride Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me. Super kind.
It's my pleasure, my pleasure. I am taking you on the dare that you set out a few years ago, I think, which was to sit with someone that you don't know for a couple of hours and talk about anything, everything, and a bit more. So here I am taking you on that dare.
All right.
So I'm going to go. I mean, you have spoken about our podcasts have kind of helped you during tough times, and you actually coined them as a mobile university. So let's go straight into the deep end here. And like, if you are designing like a curriculum for aspiring entrepreneurs, cyclists, people who enjoy riding bikes, what 3 lessons or topics would you include in this curriculum?
Wow. That's a great. You have come in swinging, dude. That's insane. Okay. All right. Love it. We're straight in at the deep end, just like you said. Okay. Wow. 3 topics for aspiring entrepreneurs and mountain bikers or cyclists and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. I think philosophy is a good one. I think if you can, I mean, hey, I am not a philosopher. Like, I'm not Marcus Aurelius. I'm none of these people. But for me, honestly, like starting to read when I got a little older has really helped put things into perspective. I think the early philosophers, people like Marcus Aurelius, for example, Meditations is one of my favorite books ever. Out of, let's say there's 100 pages, I don't understand 80 of them, but the 20 that I do understand and can grasp, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And I think putting things into some sort of perspective is super important for anyone, because I think obviously this can go down so many different rabbit holes, but you can get caught up in all of the, oh, I'm too old, I'm too young, I can't do that, I don't have the contacts or whatever. And ultimately, I think things like philosophy just give you that, you know what, you can literally do anything. You know, you can do it. So I think
it gives you some perspective into like, how to take on life, day-to-day things.
So I think honestly, just reading in general has been a massive thing for me. You know, at school, I hated it. I wasn't into school at all. I couldn't wait to get out of there, dude. At 16, I'm like, gone. See you later. And then as I've got a little older, it's like there's so much to learn from reading books and just getting perspective on things, right? And I think that's why I probably said that term about it being a mobile university so many years ago, because it is. And I've learned so much from podcasts. And obviously from podcasts, you learn about books, and it's a circle of learning and self-development, right? I think, okay, so reading is definitely going to be one. All right. I'll just say reading in general.
Yeah.
I'd say,
It's a very good one to start with.
thank you. And I'd say physical health is also super important because if you're a biker or not, I think you always feel better after doing a ride or a run or a walk or whatever it is that you're into, right? And I think if you're a creative person, this is something I learned a lot about myself not that long ago. I need to do those things because that's when I have the best ideas. And I think when you're caught up in a 9 to 5 and you don't have time for yourself, you don't give yourself the opportunity to be creative and to think about ideas and to just spitball in your own head and work through things. And so I think for me, I need that. And I've learned that over the last sort of few years in particular. Okay, it looks like you're taking time off what you should be doing. All right, I used to have this idea that just because I guess, well, I'm behind a laptop, I'm working, but not necessarily. Sometimes you're not being productive and going out for a bike ride, you come back and you're just like, oh, I've worked this thing out that I've been struggling with, or I've had this idea for a podcast, or I've had this idea for a guest, or I've had this idea for a marketing strategy or whatever. So I think leaning into the stuff that you actually enjoy is something that people should do, and giving yourself permission to go out and do it. You know, that's something that I really struggle with being an entrepreneur. I hate that term, but someone who runs their own business, you feel like you should be a slave to the laptop, and giving yourself permission to go out and do the thing, I think is super important.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it just gives you that space to just enjoy, just go out on a bike ride and just enjoy being outdoors.
Totally.
Whatever the discipline it is. And it also gets your endorphins going, stimulates both sides of the brain. It's a good moment as well to reflect even.
All of it, like the whole thing is so important. So that's going to be, I don't really know how would you term that. So we've done reading, we've done exercise in general, right? Yeah. And then the last thing I'd say would be like building a network is really important. And not just building a network, but staying in touch with your network. You know, they say your network is your net worth. And I've been really lucky, you know, over the years from before the podcast of working in the bike industry, of having contacts at brands. And then as you grow and you do other things, you can go back to those people and you can be like, hey, we worked together before. It was 10 years ago. It was good. And like, I'm doing this thing now. Would you be interested in getting involved? So your network is your net worth. And I think as we've become more of a virtual worky sort of thing, it's probably getting a little bit harder to meet people and stay in touch with people, I'd say. But I think developing a network and staying in touch with that network and not being afraid to use it either. You know, let's say you have an idea and you know someone who might work at a brand, or know someone who knows someone who works at a brand. My network has been just a godsend.
I mean, that's how you really kind of move around the industry, the bike industry, but also how you establish like friendships, business partnerships. I mean, it's the connection one-to-one people. That's how you.
The bike industry is probably the best example of it as well. I feel like because everyone seems to stick around and they will move from brand to brand. Again, building the network, but also not burning bridges within your network, I think is super important, especially if you work in a smaller industry like ours. Everyone knows everyone. People know if you're a dick, like it's going to come out in the wash. People are going to know, and you've burnt someone or whatever it could be. So building a network and keeping in touch with the network and not burning bridges within your network, I think is super important. So that's 3 all right ones, actually. I'm pretty impressed with that. So we got
that's very good.
Exercise, networking. All right.
Very good. I mean, so we started with the first kind of the curriculum that you designed for people out there. So it gives you like really actionable insights for people listening into how they can almost grow, like education, connections with people, exercising. And so I wanted to try now kind of understand a bit more about you. Your journey in business has been multifaceted. You have started back in 2014, co-founded actually HQ2 Products, a UK-based distribution company focused on bringing innovative mountain bike brands to the UK market. And along the journey, you have started a podcast, the HQ2 podcast, as a way to connect with mountain biking community and promote kind of the business as a very good way of leveraging and reaching out in a more deeper way to the people interested in your business. And that's been, I guess, you can agree or not, that has been successful. But I'm more interested in more or less.
Yeah.
But what I mean, being in business demands a lot of you. You kind of can be quite lonely at times because you are kind of very narrow-minded and focused in making it a success.
Yeah.
Looking back, has there been a moment growing the business, growing the podcast, where you realized that you created something much bigger than when you set out to the business?
Yeah. Great question. There's been a lot of moments like that, if I'm honest with you, where it's been a bit of a like, okay, wow, this has become a thing. You know, it's taken on a bit of a life of its own. Just for a little bit of context and a bit of backstory about that. So yes, I originally started a distribution company called Hookit, or HKT. People say it different ways. It was actually called Hookit, HOO. Then we got a cease and desist off Hookit.com, who are a massive like action sports agency or something. Anyway, so we changed the name. So started this distribution company with a couple of partners. Originally, it was just me on my own. Then I got 2 business partners, and it was a traditional distribution model. We buy brands. Originally, we started with Census grips through Cams Inc. We then did Joystick Components, which is a Canadian mountain bike components brand. Then we got All Mountain Style later on. But anyway, basically, we were getting these brands, and we were a startup, dude. Like, we had no money at all. We were very much hand to mouth. It's like we'd all put a little bit of money in, a lot of time. And I sat down one day, and I've always been really interested in marketing. I think at the time I probably didn't understand what it was. It was still quite new to me. I didn't really understand what is marketing.
What interested you about marketing?
Always from being a child, I've just loved creative. I've loved like ads. Like, I used to get magazines, and I was such a weird kid, dude. Like, I'd have all of the distribution companies' phone numbers in my phone, and like every week I couldn't wait to get the latest. I was a moto kid growing up, like, so all of the latest Dirt Bike Rider magazine, and I'd be like, okay, what ads are they running? What athletes have they got? How are they doing it? Like, and I was just like really into it. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know it was marketing. I was just like, I just like ads, and I just like seeing the great side of it and seeing brands grow. And I'd track like what distributor owned them or was working with them, and it was very strange. But it carved out this path, right? So it actually got out of a company that I had before doing camper vans and started, in theory, like my dream business, a distribution company. And then got a couple of brands. We got rolling a little bit, and obviously it became apparent that we didn't have any money to do marketing. So I came up with 2 ideas originally. Idea number 1, try and break the world record for the longest jump on a mountain bike. That was the first idea. I was like, okay, if I do that, that's going to put our brand on the map. It's going to put the business on the map. Probably get a few like ego-y things as well. It'd be pretty cool to be like jump the biggest thing. And honestly, man, I got so far with it. I had got a stunt coordinator, bikes sorted, a location. I've been to view a location. I'm like, right, I can't remember how big it was. It was quite big though. And I was all in. It's, you know, they say, don't you go all in to get your business off the ground. And I was pretty much willing to risk my life to get this business off the ground. And then the other thing was, you know, I was driving a lot and I was listening to a lot of podcasts, but there wasn't anything that I could totally relate to. Like, I was a big Joe Rogan fan. I was listening to a lot of like fitness stuff, health and fitness, a lot of a bit of NFL and sports stuff and whatnot, but there was nothing for mountain biking. And that was obviously what I was most into. So I thought, well, how hard can it be to start a bike podcast? It can't be that difficult. So that was the idea too, was like, right, start a podcast. So I think, I mean, I've thrown this out there a lot. I'm pretty sure it was the first ever bike podcast. I'm pretty sure it was the first ever mountain bike podcast. There was a few things on iTunes, like Ryan Leach, the old trials rider. He had something, but it wasn't a podcast. So I'm pretty sure. I mean, we're going back 2015, 2016 or something.
Yeah, it's pretty early.
So it's early for podcasts. Early, and I was really lucky that I got a guest. The first ever guest was a guy called Sai from Kotick. He owns Kotick Bikes. They've got this pretty big sort of loyal fan base. So he was the first ever guest, and that is what started this whole thing. So that was basically my way of trying to market the business using a podcast. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to, but I'm going to weave, but I'm going to come back to your original question.
Yeah. That's good. That's
I remember this one point, right? And it was years, probably years of doing these episodes, getting bigger guests, but it still kind of felt like no one gave a fuck, dude. Like it was, you put these things out, and going back to back then, it's like Instagram wasn't video, so you'd put these social titles up, and it was really hard to drive traffic to it. You kind of have to. I mean, thinking back, it was like, how do you get people to listen to a podcast? It was still quite new to people, but every time I go out on the road visiting bike shops, I'd be like, oh, I've got a podcast as well. Like, it'd be pretty cool if you could check it out. And it was actually like kind of word of mouth for a little bit. And then there was this one point. So we did an event with Hook It. So I'm doing this event with Hook It at this. It was actually Steve Pete does this like bike bonanza every year. It's like a jumble sale. And stood there selling things, whatever. And this one guy came over, and he was quite emotional. He came over and he shook my hand and he said, "You changed my life." He still gives me goosebumps to this day, dude. Like, and I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "You've changed my life."
So this is someone that you never met.
Never met this guy. He just said
straight up to you and just said, "You changed my life."
And if you'd have asked me 10 minutes before this happened, like, is the podcast a success? I'd be like, no one's listening to it. I mean, we're getting a couple of thousand downloads. It's like no one ever really reaches out. It just kind of ticks over. This one guy came over and he just said, "You have changed my life." And I'm looking at him like, he must have got me mistaken, man, like someone else. And he said, "No, because I had a guy on, his name I'm struggling to remember. It's Josh something. And he was like a health and fitness person. And he was really into the ketogenic diet. And this guy had followed some of the stuff that he talked about. And 6 months later, he came over and he said, I've lost 5 stone or whatever he said. And you changed my life." Wow. And I was just like, wow. From that, at that point, I was like, this means something now to people. That's kind of, if I'd met Joe Rogan or someone, that's exactly what I'd say to them. I'd say, "You've changed my life." Like, you've literally sent my life on a different trajectory because of your content. So it's from that moment, I was like, okay, carry on. Just keep doing it. Keep going. Keep with it. Keep building, and they will come, as they say, right? Just keep going. So that was the first moment. The second moment, honestly, was when the first brand reached out and wanted to be a sponsor. And that was a bit like, okay, this is starting to be a thing now.
People are noticing.
People are noticing.
Create waves in the mountain biking space.
Yeah, definitely. And to be honest, even at that point, I was still, it was only audio, not really done any video stuff. And I kind of liked the elusivity of it. Can't say that. The elusivity of it. So I liked no one knowing like who I really was, or like, do you know what I mean? It was kind of weird, but I was kind of into it, that you'd put this content out and it'd get a couple of thousand downloads. We're sort of edging up towards 3,000 or 4,000 every now and again. And no one knew who I was there. I was just this guy. And then, everything changed around lockdown. I mean, just before we went into lockdown, I was looking at getting a studio space, and then sorry, I'm going to give you another example.
Before we get into lockdown, let me stop there. Before we get into lockdown, I mean, there's more to that. There's more that needs to be unraveled here, because I mean, you kind of by the sounds of it, you has been ticking over the downloads, and you're getting more people, more bigger, better content out there.
Yeah,
I mean, but the podcast at that time when you started, it was kind of a one man show. Was you recording, editing? You mentioned that person that came to you and approached you and said, "You changed my life." Was that the turning point in the way you saw the podcast, or it was just that what really kept you going? Because that moment is really, I mean, that moment for anyone that is creating something, a business, a podcast, whatever it is, it's transformational, because you say, okay, yes, there is one person. If there is one person that comes to me that I don't know and tells me this, I'm sure there is tens of people that have the same experience. So
maybe.
What kept you going?
Honestly, man,
it was times.
It was just that realization that, okay, people are listening. And I guess at the time, you just have this number, right, on some analytics that don't ever really add up anyway. So you just have this number of whatever that number is. It could be 1 million, it could be whatever, but it doesn't mean anything until someone tells you. I think that's a massive thing. Like, until someone actually says it and you're like, wow, okay, this is having an effect on people. You know, it's a positive thing. And mate, and like you say, I was renegade back then, man. I didn't know what I was doing. The sound quality was probably quite shitty. We were at that point, we still had to use Skype, and the call would drop out. And it was, I mean, I don't know how I didn't get flagged so many times on different. I used to put these things out on social media. I'd be like, what music do people want to hear on the next episode? And I'd just play. People could be like, yeah, I want to hear Guns N' Roses. I'm like, yeah, cool. We're just going to play Guns N' Roses at the start of the show. It's the biggest red flag. You cannot do that at all. But I'd be like, yeah, just get the track off somewhere, play it. It was all good. I was just having fun, man. And then, you know, I guess really thinking back, I used to really like radio. Like, I actually used to enjoy listening to radio, and I kind of had these ideas of being a DJ. And it kind of felt like I was doing that. I'd be like playing music, and then I'd put like sound effects in, and it was very different to what it is now.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
But yeah, man, that was honestly, it was that person. I can't remember his name. I don't think I've met him since, but that was a massive turning point, a huge one. Was just the realization. Okay, people care. Keep going for that one thing.
Exactly,
it's worth it. It's worth all that effort. You know?
Exactly, yeah. And you mentioned on the aspect of, you mentioned like wanting to be kind of having this desire to be a radio DJ. Yeah. Well, is this something as a teenager, like really listening to radio, listening to music in your bedroom, like, yeah, I could do this, yeah. Or was it was that through listening to, driving around and listening to the radio constantly, like, I can do a better job than these guys?
No, it was way younger. Like you said, it was in my bedroom as a kid, I think. And you know, I don't know where you're from in the world, but do you do like work experience where you have to go and work at a company for a week? And you maybe like 13 or 14?
It's not mandatory. I'm originally from Portugal, so it's not mandatory. Okay. I did it, but it was out of my own choice. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Well, we had to do it. You had to find a company and you had to go there. So I really tried to go to a radio, but they didn't want me. I tried. I ended up at a motorcycle dealership instead, but that sent me on a different trajectory, I guess.
Yeah, but it aligned, I guess, with the motorsport, your background in motorsport, it aligned perfectly.
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, I knew the people, it was fine. But yeah, I was really kind of looking at the whole, you know, doing radio stuff. So, you know, I was quite into TV and stuff like that. So it's quite interesting, man. It was only a few years ago that I realized that I actually was, as a kid, I was kind of interested in it and music and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, but it's strange to think back on stuff like that. I think sometimes
it makes you think about, you know, the saying goes for full circle. You know, you start with a desire 100%. as a teenager, and like fast forward 10, 20 years, you are presenting your show. You are presenting your show.
Literally, crazy, man.
With
crazy
millions of people listening to it.
Yeah.
But before we get into the big show that we will touch upon in a minute, I wanted to still focus on this area, because I think this is like the days of the HQ2 podcast. This is kind of the foundational, and I think there's a lot to explore here. Not to trying to rush. You have, I mean, you mentioned, and you mentioned in the past that your time, like founding the HQ2 products, you had a lot of debt, a lot of financial problems that led to mental health problems as well, or challenges, let's say. I mean, has there been I want to put a twist on this question, which is there been a specific moment of doubt, perhaps, or failure that you felt and feel now most grateful about? Looking back, like that, when you look back now, you think, actually, that was a good point in my process, because that's what made me who I am now.
Yeah, for sure. I think the early days of Hook It were pretty wild, man. I mean, dude, it was crazy, really. I mean, when you think back to it, I mean,
it's like a strap, like a business strapped. Strapped in, and you just go.
Yeah, you're just riding it. You're just going for it. You know, I mean, I was pretty much willing to risk my life for it, which is wild to think. But, you know, there's so many things to it, dude. Like, especially if we're just going to, you know, talk about the early days of Hook It before before it became a bit more sustainable. I used to, my role within the company was to be out on the road visiting bike shops. And, the UK is relatively big, so there was a lot of miles to be done, but I couldn't afford a good car. So my dad's a car dealer, which is always a funny topic on the show. We've had some funny stories about my dad, but my dad's a car dealer, but he deals in shit cars basically. So I'd be getting these cars off him that were just not good to be driving around the UK, doing 300-400 miles, whatever it is a day, visiting bike shops. So there'd be all sorts of stuff happening, man, breaking down. I'd always, not that I'm like really materialistic or get embarrassed by stuff, but at that point, you're trying to put across this image that the business is bigger than what it is. You're like, okay, we're a distribution company. And most distribution companies are multi-million-pound businesses that are funded by whatever investment firms, and they've got staff and they've got brand new van to drive around in, and it's, it's a professional thing. Whereas I was in these like knackered old cars. I've got product in the boot that's, samples, and I'd park round the corner from shops so that they wouldn't see what vehicle I'd turned up in, and I think when you're struggling as well financially, and like the business wasn't originally making money, it was, like any early business, it was struggling.
You struggle with the revenue.
You go, let's say you drive from my house, you drive all the way down to, like, let's just say like where I do the podcast now, it's about a 5-hour drive away, normally where our studio is. You drive all the way down there in your knackered car. You barely afford to put fuel in it. Get there, let's say you've got a meeting organized with the buyer of a bike shop, and then they're like, oh yeah, he's decided to have a day off today. And you're like, okay, I really want to throw something through this shop window. If you had any idea how hard this has been to get here, and but yeah, man, I think all those times are quite fundamental in laying, I think if it's too easy, it's not good.
That's why I wanted to for you to share this story, because it's this success, these stories of kind of challenging circumstances where you feel,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's like the angle. When you feel like down, and like you are faced with the kind of the imminent of what you have been building on, whether it applies to anything in life, but as a business, you are put against the wall with a knife to your throat, and like what are you going to do? Are you going to look beyond the setbacks and try to improve, or are you going to quit? So that's really what kind of defines, I think, a good foundational story for success in the future.
Businesses like this, like Hookit kind of was and still is in a way, especially when they rely on sales, is really, really hard, because you can't make someone buy something. So if you've driven all that way and the person, and or let's say you did get the appointment and they're like, who are you? You're like, okay, Hookit. And they're like, I've never heard of you. What is it? Okay, we're a distribution company, quite new. Like, it's 3 guys. We're just having a go at it. Like, we've got some good brands. Can I just present them to you? So you show them the stuff, and they're like, yeah, next year we'll probably have a think about it. And there's nothing you can do about it. Like, it's like anything, I think, in life. It's a numbers game. It's like, okay, I need to do another meeting then. Need to go visit more shops. So with anything like that, it's like, it's this vicious circle of, okay, the more I do, the more opportunity, but the more you do, the more opportunity of more debt, or more just that feeling of just, my God, this is so hard to get going, but it's part of it, isn't it? And I think that's an analogy for life as well. Nothing's easy. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's every little step. I mean, there's the kind of the mantra that I have is like, keep going. Keep doing it, but try to have a direction, because obviously if you are aimless, nothing will come out of it. But if you have a clear purpose, then even if it feels like a drag in the present time, there is something that you believe in, and that real belief gives you purpose to carry on. So I think that's
and it's like when you also have for anyone out there, like maybe you have business partners as well, that almost makes it worse at times, because you're not just, I mean, in a way it's cool because you're struggling with 2 other people, or however many people there are, but at the same time it's also worse because you're all struggling. It's no one's like having a good time with this. Everyone's we used to have like a Friday meeting, and we'd just be like, Okay, how much money do we owe that brand? Okay, we owe them like 50 grand. All right, how much have we got? One. Okay, right. Okay. You know,
Oh God,
how,
what are we
how
going
are
to
we
do?
gonna how are we gonna make this work? Like, yeah, it's wild, man, thinking back, but it's what makes you, isn't it? You know what I mean? And I've always had a pretty, for my sins, like a pretty gnarly work ethic. Like I'll sit and I'll be in it as long as I need to be in it to make it sustainable or a success, which is often good, but it's often quite bad as well. It leads to burnout, and you know, and at that point, that's what I was dealing with. I think I was just in it so much, but it also had the knock-on effect. And the worst thing about it really was like I stopped enjoying why I got into it. So I got into it because I had this idea of, okay, I'm going to start a bike company and I'll ride my bike every day and I'll hang out with all these cool people and I'll go on shop rides. But the reality was I couldn't afford a bike. I hated bikes because all of my stress in life was bikes. It was like all
originated
of it
from
was
bikes.
that. Yeah, so then you get to Saturday or Friday afternoon and you're like, no, the last thing I want to do is see a bike because all I've seen all week and talked about is bikes. And I've got these brands on our back, like wanting bills paid and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So, dude, it was gnarly, man. Like it was a wild time, but thankfully we came out the back of it.
Yeah, I mean, with possibly or not the alongside that, you kind of it comes out. I mean, you build the
Yeah,
business, and
yeah.
and alongside that, the podcast also grows. And as through that, through that time, has there been any lessons that you learn from the growth of the business?
Yeah, I'd say bigger isn't always better. I think when you're younger, I always really wanted the big warehouse with the forklift truck and all of the pallets and all of the stuff and the marketing department and the this and the that. But I think as I've got older, that's like the opposite of what I want. Like it's the absolute opposite. Yeah, it'd be cool, but it's just so much stress, and you know the whole thing would just get too much for me. I think knowing my personality now, I wanted it, but it's like I wouldn't have been able to deal with it. Like it'd be awful. And honestly, I think bigger isn't always better. I think that's been a massive learning curve for me. You know, just it's not always the case. You know, I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from all of it. It's like, okay, once it's sustainable, it's kind of nice, and keeping it as small as possible and not having to deal with PAYE and pensions and you know, staff and people being off. And I think I remember one of my first ever bosses, this is going back years as well, when I was a rep on the road for another brand, was like, yeah, it costs 100 grand to have a rep on the road. And I was like, nah, it can't. And that was going back to like 2010, you know, it's nearly 25 years ago. And I always thought of that, you know, and that's back then as well. It's like the car, the fuel, the time, the expenses. So to be able to do that is quite an achievement. I think if you can have reps on the road and doing all that stuff for you, I think it's a big old undertaking. So I'd say bigger isn't always better. Keep it chill.
Yeah,
keep the stress low. You probably live a bit longer as well.
for sure. But I guess that's a very good learning lesson from that period, because it's expansion at all costs. It doesn't necessarily equal a profitable business, happy life. It just,
I had sorry to interrupt you. I had a realization the other day that I'd like to share because I think it relates to this quite well. So, you know, when you go on Instagram, for example, and they say like comparison is the thief of joy. So you're scrolling on your Instagram and you're like, hey, look what this guy's doing. You know, he's living here, he's surfing every day, and why can't I live like that? And you have that, right? Sometimes, let's be honest, you know, as much as we try to not do it, sometimes you're like, oh, this guy's life's way better than mine. But I think you can also do that with business. You can, so if I do this is a realization I've had recently. So I know we're probably jumping around a little bit here, but you know, you look at a big podcast. So for me, I look at like the Barstool Sports or something big like that. And you compare yourself to it, like, well, why aren't we doing 10 episodes a week, or why aren't we doing 20 social posts a day? But you have to like understand that it's just not, you don't have the bandwidth to do it, and just because it's bigger doesn't mean it's better, you know what I mean? And I think I've really had that realization recently. I've been like, you know what, sometimes it's just not sustainable. If you've only got a small team or you're on your own, you can't do it. You physically cannot make the stuff and keep up with that level of work. So That's been a big
It's
thing
a
recently.
very good nugget of information because it clearly pinpoints the problem that small brands have when competing with big brands. In the case for you, it like small distributor competing with big distributors. You have the small fish and the big fish, and you as a small fish, you can look up, but you can try to replicate the same tactics that the bigger brands, the bigger podcasts are using. But as a small fish, you don't have the resources or the bandwidth to do it. So you have to pivot. You have to change your approach, your tactics. So that you have to do something that the big brands can't do.
You don't always have
Whether
to be
it
the
is a
best.
niche.
Sometimes you just have to be different, and that's enough sometimes, and that makes you stand out, I think. And that's definitely going back to that original thing we were talking about with Hook It. Like that's the original. That's how I went about it. It's like, hey, we don't have to be the best, but like I can be the rep that people actually want to see, like the one that'll actually come in and have a laugh and not be too hands on, not be pushy, probably bring some biscuits or, you know, do you know what I mean? Or like bring a gift, just something that like makes you different from everybody else, because you know that the big guys aren't doing that. They're just target driven, get in, do the job, get out. So I went a bit more like hands off, laid back. People would be like, okay, cool, Davy's coming. Like, it'll be a lot. Like, we'll have a bit of fun. We'll do something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't good for sales. It was the worst. But people over time start trusting you, and they start, actually, we'll give this guy a shot. Like, or we'll give the company a shot because he's been coming for 2 years. We've never given him an order, but he's still come. He's still showed up. Still brought biscuits. You know, still smiles when he walks through the door, or brings something cool to look at, or whatever it could be. And honestly, that's where like the podcast kind of started to help back then, because after all of this time and things became a bit more sustainable, then people would be like, oh, I listened to that show you did with Danny Hart, for example. It'd be like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, you must be legit. Like, you're not legit. Do you know what I mean? Like, you must be like trustworthy.
Yeah,
you know, you're doing all this other stuff. So
yeah, you're building a reputation on the side that you are
you're building a network.
Yeah, exactly. Perfectly put. And that follows you around. As you said, if you are a dick to people, people will know you and then will avoid you. If you're nice to people, people want to chat with you. So it's important to maintain that network, maintain relationships, because then people see you for who you are as a person rather than the business side of it.
Yeah, I think it ties in quite nicely with like, you can't hide either. I think if you're going into a shop, there's two examples. You're going into a shop and you have to go in and introduce yourself, and you don't know you at all. That's quite a hard thing to do. Like, you can't hide behind it. You can't be fake. You can't be someone you're not. You kind of have to be who you are. And it's the same with the podcast. Is a great example as well, because you can't hide for 3 hours doing a podcast, you know, or whatever it is. Like, you can't. You have to be yourself. So I think that builds trust, and people will be like, actually, he's not just full of shit. Actually seems like him. That's just who it is. So that's been a big learning curve.
And you mentioned podcast, because that's what I wanted to touch upon now, because in 2020, obviously everyone knows what happened, and it's a massive pivot point for all of us. And you started the Lockdown Companion, that became the Right Companion. I mean, one of the is kind of, I try to ask left field questions here. What's can be one overlooked or surprising positive that kind of from a habit or a mindset perspective that you developed during that pack, that the COVID times, and still that you still use today?
I think so much, man. Honestly, like when you really think, I think all of it got caught up in it all, obviously, and a lot was changing, a lot was happening, but the person I was before that is a very different person to what's sat here today. So
interesting.
Honestly, so if we look at the big picture, so Hook It was kind of still struggling, if I'm honest with you, around 2020. The podcast had probably was bigger than the actual business I'd originally started trying to promote, in the way that it had sponsors and it was like becoming a thing. And I think I could see more of a vision with that, of like, okay, I know where I want this to go. So just before lockdown, I went to try and sign for a studio space, which was a massive thing. At this point, it was still all virtual. And I was like, all right, I'm going to get a studio, and I'm going to build a studio, and I'm going to start inviting guests and really like level this thing up. if you think back to 2020, it was still, podcasts still were relatively new. Like it wasn't the boom that we seen after it. So I'd say, I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I was still kind of thinking ahead of like, okay, this could go somewhere in the future and could be an actual media company and stuff like that. So I was just about to go and sign for a studio, and I was kind of going to go all in on that, maybe sell out of Hook It. I don't know what my thoughts were. And then everything changed. I'd say, from a personal standpoint, I probably wasn't in a great place in 2020. Honestly, business was below average. It was kind of struggling to pay bills, to be honest, a lot of the time. And then lockdown happened, and it kind of felt like, even though it wasn't, because it was very stressful. Those first few months of the lockdowns were really stressful because no one knew what was going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you can think what you want about the COVID stuff, whatever. We'll not go into that. But those first few months, so all the shops closed. And you're like, okay, that's scary. So now we have no business because we only really sold B2B at that point. We didn't do any direct consumer sales. So that was scary. I had no idea. Like, how do you make ends meet now? Like, I have no idea. Someone just took our business away. But then, after getting through those first few months from memory, then things started to ease a little bit. And it was like, okay, bike shops are now open because they're travel, or I don't know, whatever. I can't quite remember. It's 4 years ago, man.
But it was
it felt like a load had been lifted. That's what it kind of felt like. And I personally had time to think about what I was doing. And it's like, okay, and that's kind of the beauty of what we talked about before. It's like, you need that time to really think about, what am I doing? Do I even like it? Could I be doing it better? Could I make changes or whatever? And it was honestly just time to just go, okay. And at that point, I wasn't even really riding before COVID stuff happened. And then, you got all this time in your day, really. It's like, I don't have to be on the road visiting shops. I can go for a bike ride. And I'd managed to do a little deal with Canyon. So they were sending me a bike, and I just rode so much. And I fell back in love with riding. It was around 2020. I was like, actually, this is sick, and I really like it. And all of your friends were still off work because they couldn't go to work. So we were like riding in the day and stuff. And then obviously, I think around that point is when we started the lockdown companion. It's probably right then, probably like the first month out of the way, I think, give or take. I'd have to have a look, but I think we started it in April 2020, I think. But yeah, massive takeaway there was just like, I can breathe. I can have a think about things. I can start having a routine every day, because I didn't have a routine. Like, one day I'd get up at 5 and drive for 5 hours. The next day I'd get up at 10 and drive for 1 hour. Then the day after that, I'd get up at 7. There was no like structure to anything. And I think I've learned a lot about myself since then, of like, okay, I need a bit of structure. I need to be like, okay, this is what I do every day in the morning. This is my morning routine, and all this sort of stuff that you hear about on podcasts about developing a morning routine, and all this sort of stuff of like, okay, get up, have an ice bath or whatever it could be, go for a run. Like, I actually had time to do it for a change. It was like, okay, I can actually do this stuff. And it really helped, man.
COVID. Sorry, go on.
No, it's okay. No, it really helped though. It really helped just like get clear on things of like, okay, this is the direction I want to go in now, I think, especially during this point, So yeah, that was a big takeaway.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a reset button, and it was a reset button for many other people, including myself. Suddenly you are found like with a lot of time in your hands, and you think, well, what are my priorities? How do I want to grow? Do I want to
what do you want your days to look like?
This career? Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to go to work. What does a day look like? That's actually quite an interesting thing to do, isn't it? Because you can actually do what your heart and your head wants to do, whereas before it's kind of, you're forced into this thing almost.
Yeah, I mean, I was during COVID. I was writing most days. I was taking like my fantasy life of being a professional writer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
so for
true.
me, it was great. Looking back, there's other things that I would have done differently, but that's kind of my personal take of always wanting to try to improve myself. But it was great because it provided with that kind of reset button and just do things that you enjoy, because there's no other responsibilities.
Can't do anything else.
Can you talk us a little bit about what was the lockdown companion, because it's such an apt name, because it can't name something better than that. It's just like perfect.
Yeah, we've kind of nailed it with that one. So okay, so I guess this was, you got that little point to breathe and you're like, okay, well, what am I going to do? But yeah, okay, what am I going to do? But what's everyone else going to do? They're going to need stuff to fill their days and their time and something to maybe ease the stress of what's going on in day-to-day life. So I dropped Ollie, who's now my co-host, Ollie Wilkins, professional mountain bike rider, all-round good dude. I just dropped him a message one day. Literally just texted him out of the blue. He'd been a guest before on the show a few times and we'd stayed in touch. And I wouldn't say we really knew each other, but we said a few times like we need to do something together because we always have a good time. We always vibe. Like it's always pretty fun. So I literally dropped him a text message. I was looking at him the other day actually, and I just put something along the lines of people are going to be bored. We should do something. And he was like, yes, let's do something. And I think then I sent him back like, okay, sent him an idea like, okay, why don't we meet on Skype and let's just hit record and see what happens. And that's literally what we did. So we just hit record and something happened. I don't know what it was, but we were just having fun and we knew that there was no stress, didn't know it was going to go anywhere. I was just like, let's just fill our week. Let's just do an episode a week and we'll just talk about what's going on in the world a little bit and we'll get guests and we'll just have fun. So the lockdown companion was just that. It was a companion for people in lockdown. And it was the first one was so fun because we were both figuring it out. And what was really cool, I guess, looking back, it's like we were getting to know each other as well because we didn't know each other that well. It wasn't like we were two best mates like we probably are now. We were like figuring it all out together. We were, and I think people who were listening and then watching further down the line were enjoying coming along this journey with us of just trying to figure it out. So that's what the lockdown companion was. I don't know where the name came from. We had a few silly names that we'd come up with before. I can't remember them though, man. I can't remember what they were. I'd have to look. But yeah, there was a few silly names thrown around and then somehow we settled on lockdown companion. And we're like, dream, let's just go for it. It's kind of perfect.
It's a perfect name. And it sounds like you were riffing off each other and just trying to find a chemistry that worked for you.
Yeah. But it's funny because like when we'd spoken before, doing episodes or whatever, we discovered that we both liked all the same content. So we both had the same favorite podcast. So without even saying it, we both knew the vibe that we wanted to try and create. And that's exactly what it was. There was every single week we'd be like, this is how the conversation would start before hitting record. It'd be like, hey man, good week? Yeah, pretty good. Got anything to talk about? Nah, nothing. All right, let's go. And then we'd just go. And then you just figure it out.
Wow. That's like really thrown into the deep end. Like, let's go. But that takes bravado. That takes balls to do that, and confidence as well. Because
and the big picture, although it's different now how I do the podcast. Obviously, Ollie's with me pretty much. We're together on pretty much every one. I was still doing the Hook It podcasts on my own. So I do like a lockdown companion episode, and then it'd be a guest. So we'd be like 2 episodes a week usually. But it totally changed how I did all of it because previously, there was one turning point in my podcast career that I'll always remember. The guest was Luca Shaw, downhill mountain biker, pretty big name at the time, still a big name now, but at the time he was just signed for Santa Cruz Syndicate.
Right.
I'll be honest, like my race knowledge and athlete knowledge isn't that good. And I, over time, figured out you just own it. Like, don't worry about it. It's all good. You can't know everything. But when I had the podcast and people were, starting to listen, I kind of felt like I needed to be this expert and this, everything about everyone. So I used to make all these notes, man. Like I'd have notes all over and I'd really try and piece the episodes together, which is, I guess, good. Like it's not a bad thing. But I remember Luca Shaw, we'd been recording for about 20 minutes and I'd gone through all of the notes and I was just like, now what? Oh my God, I just have to be me and just talk to him like a normal person. And it was a massive shift and the whole thing changed at that point. And then I stopped doing as much research because I think there's got to be an element of figuring it out and like together, you know what I mean? And then the lockdown episodes were the perfect example of that. We'd have nothing, dude. We'd have like 2 things written down on a notepad. I'd be like, oh, I really want to talk about this TV show I've watched. And then everything else would just be riffing and reflecting and the past, the present, the future, whatever. And I think I've really learned that that's how I am best at doing this. I shouldn't over prepare because I'm too caught up then in the notes and the structure. Like I need, so we just had, sorry, jumping around all over, but we just had Rob Warner on the show. If looking back 5 or 6 years ago, having Rob on would, obviously it still is a big thing. It's Rob Warner, it's fucking the voice of mountain biking, and it's the man. I'd have been so nervous doing that before. And I really had to check myself this last one and be like, I've just had a bucket list guest on the show who's now a mate. We did no prep at all, like nothing. We're just like, oh, let's just sit down. We'll just hit record. Like we'll be fine. And it's been like a real interesting journey to just become comfortable in just doing it and just being in it. I don't know if that's getting better at it. People will probably disagree, but it's just been a big learning curve, really. That whole thing of starting with all the notes and then just being able to just hold conversation and chat to someone, and whether they are Rob Warner or Lucas Shaw or anyone, it can be a person on the street. I think that skill is like transferable throughout life.
Yeah, I mean, totally. But it then also speaks to your experiences, because that level of comfort and a level of ease into being comfortable in talking with any person that comes, and like you sit down and feel it's like in a very informal setting and you just chat about their experiences and their life and their work. I mean, that takes skill. You can go to university to learn that skill. It's called journalism.
Totally. The best way of doing it is be about 20 years old and be a rep for a motocross bike for a company, mate. That was an absolute baptism of fire, honestly. Because
tell me more. Tell me more.
Well, that was my first ever like industry job. I worked for a brand called One Industries. I was sales reps. Even back then, it'd be 35, I guess, roughly what I am now, but like 40. So when I was like 20, going into these bike shops, it was kind of unheard of. And they just think you were just this fucking idiot, man, this kid, this like, I was young, I was confident. Was I confident? No, I was confident in the way that I'd act, but not internally. You'd just be like, oh, this is going to be the worst. Got to go in this bike shop. The owner hates me. He never buys anything, but I've got to do it. And it was a big learning curve. But like those early days of being on the road kind of made me be good at it when I got to doing my own thing with Hook It. And then passed us on to then having a guest and being able to sit and chat to them and just been like, I mean, it is what it is. You're either going to enjoy it or you're not, or, it's going to be awkward for a bit. It usually is. I think we always say that, Ollie and I, whenever you have a guest in the studio, it's like those first few minutes are like a little awkward, a bit slow, and then you ease into things. Like it takes 45, 50 minutes, even with doing this today, like it took, for me, I feel more comfortable now than the first 10 minutes. Do you know what I mean? So it just takes time.
Yeah, it takes time to warm up, but also it's a skill that you learn. I mean, by the sounds of it, you're being thrust into the deep end as in a motorsport, like a 20-year-old rep going to motorsport shops. You have to speak with people. That's the skill. You have to interact with people. You have to find ways of making them interested
common
in
ground.
Exactly. Yeah,
definitely.
So it's people skills. That's kind of the thing, and I kind of through being uncomfortable with the conversations with people you don't know, you get more comfortable in doing that because it becomes less scary. Totally. So that's totally like the heart of podcasting is, and I guess it applies to many other aspects in life. It's just how to make someone comfortable. Because 100%. I guess in the end of the day comes to how to create relationships with people. Everything comes back to people. How it all comes back to people. Connect with people. Yeah.
It all comes back to the network.
Exactly. There you go.
Callback.
So I wanted to kind of link back, kind of not to try to change gears too much, but link back to the Ride Companion podcast. So we started as a lockdown companion and became Ride Companion podcast. I mean, from a business perspective, what are kind of the biggest lessons that you, or surprises that you have learned through this journey of setting up this media company and working with brands in partnerships, in promotions and professional projects. What are the biggest takeaways from you?
I mean, it's been a massive journey, man, the whole thing. But ultimately, it came to a point where we're working with like a decent amount of brands, some in industry, some out. That's been a massive thing. I always used to have this idea that, okay, I remember when the show started to get decent numbers, like it was doing all right, and brands would obviously reach out. They'd see somehow iTunes charts, I don't know, whatever. I don't know how they find you, but they'd reach out and be like, hey, we're from, I don't know, whatever, Billy Bob's Mattress Company. And I'd be like, cool, not interested. It's not a biking product. It won't work. Move on. And I'd always just try and stay in biking. Massive reality change, massive shift was like, okay, everything is actually relatable in a way because our audience is 35 to 45-year-old male that have a 10 grand e-bike that, I mean, everyone sleeps on a bed. Pretty much, I'd say 99% of our audience sleeps on a bed, just using the mattress as a good example.
Yeah.
And then, so it's like, okay, pretty much everything, if you do it good, can be relatable. So yeah, we opened ourselves up. I guess one of our biggest sponsors to date is Birks, they make the Hydra Shot, which is like a portable jet wash for washing your bike. It's the dream. It's really good. But they also do drills and sanders and all this sort of stuff. And it's surprising
DIY.
when you look at the data that they send us that it's mainly people also buying drills and sanders and leaf blowers and all sorts of stuff. So I don't know. It's been a massive change there in like how we approach finding partners. Our audience is a very engaged audience of 35 to 45-year-old males. So, like I said, that's pretty much good for most brands, unless it's Shiwis or I don't know, something like that. It's probably not as relatable, but you know what I mean. So yeah, that's been a massive change. And then I guess from getting more brand partnerships and doing more, the reason that we kind of turned the whole thing into a media company, it's like, how do we do more for these brands than just doing an ad read? So let's say a brand comes to us, again, let's just use Birks as an example. And they're like, okay, we want to have 12 ads on your show for the year. Yep, easy. That's like the easiest thing we can do. You tell us what we want to promote. We'll work together to build a script. And then we'll embed this ad in these episodes. That's easy. No problem at all. And then it's like, well, how can we build that out to be more valuable to you? And then that's kind of got us. So we've got now 2 producers who are amazing when it comes to creative filming, photography and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, well, how do we use more of these guys' time? How can we make them more valuable? Well, we could go to Birks and say, okay, you've done the 12 ads. Well, how about a bank of photos? Cool. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, well, how about we make you a product video, like a review video, or trying to think, we could literally do everything for you if you want. If you want to launch a new jet wash, give it us first. We'll shoot the promo. We'll shoot the assets. We will do copywriting for you. We'll do literally all of it and just deliver it back to you in a Google Drive document or whatever. So that's kind of the reason for changing. And also being able to do that has opened us up to more brands as well. The bike industry is really difficult at the moment, as you probably know. So to make our show with the people and the this and the that sustainable, just with bike industry people, like sponsors, would be really difficult. And we also obviously have a few, just to be totally transparent, like we have a few examples where we can't work with a lot of bike brands because maybe Ollie has a connection with a rival company, or so it does sometimes make it quite difficult.
It's a conflict of interest.
And we always want to be like I overthink all this stuff way too much. But we always want to be, I don't want to have, I don't know, Troy Lee designs clothing. But then we're doing an ad for another brand, X brand. It just feels off. Like whether Troy Lee are paying or not, there's a connection there, and it's all about going back to not burning bridges and doing stuff that you probably shouldn't do. So we do get held back. I say held back, but you know, just because a brand has budget to pay Ollie doesn't mean that they have budget to spend on a podcast. So we have these little things sometimes where you're like, yeah, we'd love to work with Maxis. Of course, that'd be sick. They've got budget. This the great brand. Okay, but Ollie and myself are Goodyear sponsored, but they don't sponsor the podcast. So we have these things all the time. So going out of industry for us,
massively open doors.
It has. It's opened a lot of doors, and and it makes it sustainable. Do I just want to do that? No, there's got to be a fine balance. We always try and say we have 3 ads on every episode. If we can have 1 that's biking and 2 that isn't, that's fair. If it's all 3 that are one way or the other, then it feels off. So it's got to be a mix of both, I think.
Yeah, and I guess to that point of, as it's a smart move to turn it into a media company, because you are providing like a comprehensive service. It's an agency kind of almost providing a promotional kind of service, the platform to the brand
as well. Exactly, like the platform, like the numbers don't lie. And I think once we started, because I'm not analytical at all, like I'm the worst. I'm not a numbers guy, as we probably discovered throughout this conversation. But when you actually look at the numbers, you kind of go, all right, like this has actually got value now, not just to bike brands, but to other brands outside of mountain biking or cycling or whatever you put it. So again, a few people have said that to me recently, especially when they've like read through our latest deck. They're like, well, the numbers just don't lie. Like that's what it is. It's, you can wrap it up and cover it in glitter. Doesn't matter. The fact that there's that many people listening, whether it's a big number or a small number, it doesn't matter. Like as long as it's engaged, that's what's important. So yeah, that's been a big learning curve recently. That I'm enjoying.
From a personal kind of personal view, I've noticed that you have some kind of relationship with Liquid Death.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, we do.
I mean, Liquid Death is such a famous brand within marketeers, because it's the way they kind of ruptured the segment that they are in water, and really completely transformed it to stand out. It's very, very successful. And the pricing, the products, the promotions, the fact that they use comedians to like write their content, it's amazing. To have Liquid Death be supporter of the show, it brings a level of what is the right word? I'm trying to find the right word. Is
like authenticity and not authenticity.
Well, I wouldn't say authenticity, but it would say a level of respect that the brand sees you as. Yeah, you can say authentic. You can say that the levels of engagement that you're generating with this show really resonate with your audiences. The Liquid Death sees as that valuable, and they want to associate with your tone of voice and the way you carry the show. So that that's kind of, it's perfect, because it's just it's how to interact with brands, how to bring brands in as partners, as collaborators, or as sponsors to the show, and really find in my view, find the sweet spot where you believe in the brand, is something that you would feel happy using it, and is also something that your audience would be happy to see and hear about. And it's also massive kudos to you, because I mean, if it's not clear by now, I mean, I'm a fanboy of Liquid Death, so it's
they're killing it. But I mean, depends how I really want to get here, but okay. Well, let's go for it. Let's go for it, man. We're shooting the shit. So the Liquid Death thing, this kind of goes back to having it to the network, right? So our old contact, he might listen, I'm not sure to this, but Ollie, absolute legend. Like he's, I did his podcast. He used to have a podcast. So anyway, I did his podcast and we stayed friends. This is going back to the original. This is a callback all the way back to the beginning again. This is building a network. So Ollie and I, we stayed friends. There was nothing to do with this company, this water company at the moment, at that point. And then anyway, he got himself a job at the water company. And he's like, hey, like, obviously I can seed you some product. And I was like, yep, sounds good. Water sounds good. Obviously, we've similar to yourself. I've seen this brand around. They're doing crazy marketing. They're doing these videos within like Blink 182, and it's like so cool. It'd be so good to be a part of it. So they send water to us. That's all it is. They just send us some water. And as far as I'm aware, that is how they have got a lot of traction. Is they will just give creators, podcasts, whatever, water, you're going to drink it because you're going to get thirsty doing what we do. So it's going to get natural, authentic placement on the show. So that's what we did for a whole year. We had Liquid Death with us, always drinking it if we need to or whatever. However, the original conversations with this were like, okay, just do this for a bit. And then when we can, we will give you budget to promote the podcast, to promote the product. And I guess in a way, this is kind of like the dirty side of podcasting because Ollie's now not at Liquid Death. They got rid of him. And all of a sudden, that idea, that, that project, that whatever you call it, that relationship has gone.
Yeah.
So again, like just being truthful, this is where we've had to bring in someone who looks after our business development and puts together deals because you work on what someone said to you. Okay, if we do this for X amount of time, we're going to give you all of this. Like you said, you've seen Liquid Death on our show, right? I'm sure you've seen it. It's in the background. We're drinking it all the time. We've got the merch. We're repping this company. But being honest, we've done it for free because we expected further down the line that they'd be like, okay, we can actually sponsor you guys now. We can actually pay you back for this promotion. Now, it sounds shitty, but like we are running a business. Like we could have done that with any brand. We could have gone to Evian, Buxton Water, I don't know, name whatever water brand or energy drink brand and gone, hey, we're going to put a Liquid Death carton behind us for every episode. It's going to be seen by, I think I did a tally up actually. So it's been seen by around 10 million people throughout us doing that. So that, let's be honest, you're a podcaster, creator, business person, that has a value. That is massive, a value. So as it stands now, we've done all that in return for no one answers your emails anymore.
Okay.
So that's like, and I think when you do content creation and stuff like that, and it's, dude, you're like, I'm going to be involved with this brand. That's so cool. Yeah, it's cool. But the people still need to be paid. It's like, there's a trade-off, there is a trade-off with it. Like I say, the whole time Ollie has been at Liquid Death, I can't speak highly enough of Ollie. I can't remember his second name. I'm so sorry. I'd love to give him a shout out. It's been amazing, dude. Like he's sent us the stuff and the merch and the paid for us, me and my partner, to go to Download Festival, guest VIP tickets. So sick. And it felt like it was going somewhere. But then Liquid Death made 2,000 people redundant and all of a sudden gone. So just needs to be mindful of that, I think, sometimes. And it's something that I'm learning more and more of as I get more into this, because that level of, and don't get me wrong, we're in a niche. It's a micro amount of views. It's whatever compared to what they do across bigger platforms. They gave a jet away, for God's sake. I mean, come on. They're doing stuff on a way bigger scale. But if 10 million people have seen this stuff and 1% go to the shop and buy it, then we've done our job. So in my opinion, that needs to be honored at some point. And that makes me sound shitty. I know, probably a bit like a dick, but this is
I don't think it does.
That's probably not spoken about sometimes, And I guess there's loads of creators out there that have done this. It's probably not just us. I've seen this stuff. Steve-O uses it, Birks, Kreischer, all the podcasts that I look up to and watch, they always have Liquid Death around them. And I'd hate to think that given their platform, which would be 10x ours, 20x, I don't know, loads more, that's happened to them as well. That I hope it's not. I hope it's not a strategic thing of like, let's just give all this stuff out. We'll get all the promotion out of them. We'll get all of the brand awareness, and then we'll just go. It kind of feels a bit off, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, I mean it does. I mean thanks for sharing that, because it does open the curtain into the cogs of the machine, and it's I guess it's important because people listening, watching,
it's not always what it seems, is it?
Exactly.
Like you say, you see this thing, you're, oh, look at that brand they're working with, and then like the reality of it is, you're like, kind of.
Exactly.
But it's working.
Not really.
Because you talked about it. Like, how interesting that it's what we've done has worked.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's very strange. Yeah, I mean, I even still do my job. I sit here, drink Liquid Death. Like, I live up to our side of the bargain, dude. It's always around. I'm always, and I think when you're putting these deals together and working with these brands, it takes time for them to get going. It's not an instant, okay, we'll run an ad and all of a sudden we're going to get, massive revenue from it. These partnerships take time, they take trust. And when it feels like that trust has been broken, it's a bit shitty, to be honest with you. It's like we lived up to our side of the bargain. We offered you product placement. We offered you to make sure that every guest is drinking this drink because down the line, we want to work with you more officially. Like I say, I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but it doesn't look like it is at the moment. It looks like they just had a whole year's worth of publicity out of us for nothing, basically.
So, yeah. No, it rings the rings true to me because it's the aspect of content creators out there. They are using products that they enjoy, and then they start shouting about them on social media, on their socials. They start growing, and obviously the product is getting visibility, and they reach out to brands like, well, I am working already. Don't you want to get officially settle this into a signed contract? But it's sometimes it can be quite frustrating because they say, well, carry on, what are you doing? You just keep promoting our brand. We don't want to pay you at the moment. And you're like, oh, okay, well, thank you very much, then I'll stop doing it. Then if it's like this, then I'm happy using your products, but I will
you need to be mindful of it, man. I think you can get taken advantage of, and like I say, we brought this guy in recently to handle some of our, we call it business development. It sounds so kooky, but and he said,
you entering the corporate world.
Yeah, exactly. He said even today is like, we've built up this platform, and to just give people access to it for free, or in return, he sounds so spoiled, I know, but like in return for just some product, it's like there's only one way that's winning. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not us ever. It's the brand that's winning. I think partnerships need to be symbiotic. They need to work together. I don't think there's anything wrong in that.
You are at the point in your media career, in your podcasting career, where, if I were in your position, I would no longer take. It's easy to say. It's like a 2020 hindsight view. It's always easy to say when you're sat on the other side of. But it's kind of, as a business, it starts to be a business relationship. Yes, you can, within the business contract, you can start giving, okay, I'll give you more exposure because I enjoy our relationship and I want to grow. I want it to grow.
Yeah.
But that
it's interesting because I feel like
I've
I've done all steps of that. I feel like, when it was just a bit of fun, it was just, well, just thank you for the, whatever it is, the jet wash. That's kind of how that started. And then, that's cool. Yeah, I'll use it. I'll make a video for you, whatever. All good. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I've saved £200. All good. That's amazing. And obviously very grateful. But then it gets to that point where then it was actually for us, it was the biggest one for us, honestly, was AG1. They were amazing. And people can say what they want about AG1. I don't know, whatever. You can have your own opinion on whether it's good or bad. Ollie and I had our first meeting ever together with a partner with AG1. And the lady, bless her, looked at our pricing and just said, what are you guys doing? This makes no sense. You should be double what you're charging. And we were like, okay, well, we'll double it then if you want. And she was like, okay, right, I'm going to double your price for you because what you're charging makes no sense because you don't know what you're doing. And this is 2021, I think. So we'll double your pricing. And she said, even at that, I'll book every episode for the whole year. And we were like, okay. But sometimes you just, and I'm always happy to talk to people about it because if you don't know how to structure these things and how to price, they say, don't you cheap once, you cheap forever. And there comes a point where you're just like, well, this isn't sustainable anymore because I can't literally can't keep the lights on. I can't afford to. So people like that along the way, man, have been really helpful. She could have said nothing and just been like, oh, I'm just going to take these guys for all. I'm just
take advantage of these guys.
Yeah. But she didn't. She was like, no, you guys are doing good numbers here. This is what it's worth to us. And it was like, okay, thank you. Really appreciate it. And then from then it's been like, okay, we'll just try and have fair pricing for things. I think.
I think it's a great. I'm very happy and grateful that you got us started on this topic. It wasn't something that I had in mind because it's such talking this side of the business with creators.
Yeah.
Some people don't feel comfortable talking about that side because it's very, very personal, and you're perhaps revealing things that you don't want to be talking about. But
Yeah.
it does shine a light on the fact that starting a business, starting a creator, as a creator content, start as a podcaster, they kind of at the beginning involves a bit kind of a relationship, involves trust. And then, as you grow, then that trust becomes a business partnership, because I think that's how business is dealt with. You need to
Yeah.
have something solid so that people are not just taking advantage of you.
Yeah. I agree.
So interesting.
Hmm.
I'm wondering is as well, you in that case of the AG1, you had that the person helping you, really helping
Yeah.
you price better. Has there been, along that journey with the right companion, has there been key people in the industry or guests that have kind of helped you shape better content or shape better business deals
Yeah.
with brands or partnerships?
It's hard to think of people specific, but I think, good question. It's hard to think of people that are like really specific, but I think it's brands in general.
Mm-hmm.
When they say they want to work with you, that's a massive thing, because it's like for many years you're going to them and trying to prove, oh, like this is what we do, and you're like on the hard sell a little bit, like just trust us, please. The opposite way, and they're like, no, we really want to work with you. That's a huge shift, because then it's like, wow, okay, how do we structure
You're being
this? What's it?
recognized.
And I think for any meeting like that I ever do with anyone who wants to advertise with us or whatever, I always say to them, okay, like, what does this look like for you? What is a home run partnership? What does it look like? What do you want to see? And just let them tell you. And then you can be like, yeah, we can do that. No problem at all. This is roughly what it's going to look like. And then I think that's been a huge shift, dude. And honestly, I don't take it for granted at all, because there was many years of trying to prove what a podcast was, what the value is to brands. And then now it's starting to shift. I mean, not to get political, but look what just happened in America with the election. That was pretty much one off podcasts.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like, if
it's
you need
been
a use
dubbed.
case,
Yeah, exactly. It's been dubbed the podcast election, with
Yeah,
Trump and the Kamala Harris going on to multiple podcasts.
totally. And I
Very, very
think
strategically going to those podcasts. Yeah.
totally. And I think brands now, not because of that, it's happened before, but have been like, okay, these guys, these two absolute idiots are talking to our audience, like they are talking to the people we want to reach. And so we've become a bit more useful to them, which is a huge shift. And I think anyone that's doing that's doing a podcast or whatever, stick with it, because you'll get to that point at some point where a brand is like, okay, we want to tap into your audience, but don't do it for free. Because I've been there and done it many times. But yeah, dude, apart from, I can't really think of specific people. I mean, the guys at Focus have been amazing. They really have, to both Ollie and myself. Obviously, I piggyback off Ollie's partnership with Focus quite a lot, but they've been amazing. Again, we promote bikes for them. We promote content they're putting out. Like, it's a really symbiotic relationship, that. And again, proof's in the pudding. Look at the numbers. It's like, we sell bikes. We know we sell bikes. Kind of works, But yeah, as far as other people go, it's hard to really pinpoint people. What I will say, though, sorry to go on another tangent, but it's like some of the bigger guests that we've had are obviously not ran by, but like have managers. And that's been a big shift of like, okay, we're not dealing with, let's say, Danny McCaskill's coming on. Yeah, all right, we've got a good relationship with Danny, all good, but you're dealing with the manager. And that is a shift as well, because then you kind of realize the value of what you do, I guess. And it's like, and then, and sometimes they'll even help you, like, okay, like, this is what you should be doing in a way, if you want to, have these people on and stuff.
Very good.
Yeah.
That's a good learning. So just to like create a little bit of parenthesis here, you're talking about briefly about my experience, is that kind of resonates with what you just said, is that I'm not at that level, obviously, but I've had my first encounter of wanting to book a guest. In this case, I reached out directly to the guest, and the guest put me in contact with a PR agency.
Yeah.
And then the PR agency was like, okay, right, yeah, you can. you can go to your podcast, but you need to show us like all the data, show us where you are, blah blah blah. I sent it through, and they said no, sorry, you're not big enough for him, so you can't have him on the podcast. I'm like, okay,
Right.
fair enough. That's fine. I totally understand. This is a business deal.
What happens when you try and book Brad Pitt?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
A
aiming
little
too high.
lower.
Aiming too
A
high.
little lower now. I mean, yeah, that sucks, dude, that happened. That really does suck. And it's hard to know why.
I mean, I understand why it is, because
I don't understand it at all. I really don't, because been there and done it. It's like the conversation that said guest will have with you could be 10 times better than anything they'll have on a bigger platform, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't agree with it, if I'm honest with you. I think if the guest has got time, then why not? You know, no one's losing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I hate that stuff. I'm not a big fan of it. You know, and again, I've been on the receiving end of that. I've definitely been on the, not really with an agency, but more reaching out to a guest in the early days, to be honest, as well, and been like, hey, I'm doing this, and they'd be like, nah, I'm not into it. I don't know what it is. Like, what's a podcast? What are you doing? What, you fucking loser? So I think, just mate, if anything, it's fueling your fire, isn't it? It's like, all right, well, wait till they want him on, or
exactly,
her, and then be like, nah, you're not big enough.
Yeah, I mean, I take that. I take that with as a source of fuel, because they say, okay, well, I'll prove you wrong. I'll come back to you, or I will not come back to you.
Well,
but I'll next time I see you, I'll like, remember that time I asked you? I don't know. I'm not going to do that, but it's just fuel, because it's kind of my competitive side. Playing out.
Yeah, of course, it's natural, mate. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It. You want what you do to be a success. You want good guests. It's as simple as that. And it goes back to what we talked about before a little bit. It's just a numbers game, isn't it? It's like for every one that says no, there's two that say yes.
I mean, this probably is an easy question for you, but I don't know. I'll ask you anyway, because I'm interested in finding out from your perspective. How do you personally stay grounded and maintain that connection with your audience?
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't really have an answer for you. I think ultimately you've got to be doing what you want to do. And some people will love it and some people will hate it. And I think rather than trying to tailor it, I've been there and done that. I'll be honest. I tried to be someone I wasn't, like pre-Lucas Shaw episode where things changed. You're trying to be this person that, okay, I want to be the know-it-all of mountain bike, downhill, enduro, whatever it is. I'm trying to be this industry person. And honestly, a lot of it was just a front. Like I wasn't that person. And I think once you can just get over that, I guess that's ego. I think it's probably a bit of an ego death. Just be yourself. And Ollie always says it's about just keeping it fun. And honestly, that's kind of our vibe. It's like if we're having fun, what can go wrong? Really?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you can get a little weird. I don't know, tinfoil that stuff, whatever. But ultimately, it's interesting because we do have some big guests, and we've had some episodes that have been really quite big in our niche. But the ones that people seem to love are just me and Ollie having fun, just shooting the shit. And that's what we always talk about this, because that's the sort of stuff that I enjoy listening to. Like, I want to feel like I'm in the pub with my mates. I don't want personally, like, people are different. I was with another podcaster at the weekend, and he had someone talking to him who was like saying, "Oh, I love tech stuff," and I'm like, "That's just not me at all. It's not us." So as long as you're doing something that you feel fulfilled by and that that you're happy with, I honestly think when you're trying to tailor it too much, you end up being lost in it. You know, it's like that. You've seen the example of the guy who did the eating things on YouTube. Do you know that? You know that story? He'd do like these crazy eating challenges on YouTube, and his audience obviously wanted more. Like he'd drink 10 liquid deaths, and then they're like, "Oh, see if you can drink 50," and then he'd do 50, and then it'd be like, "Okay, can I eat 200 cheeseburgers as an hour?" And next thing you know, the guy's like obese because he's lost himself in it. He's like lost himself in trying to be this person for this audience that ultimately don't care about you. They're just trying to
be entertained.
Yeah. ultimately, yeah.
What you just said applies to anything in life. You have to be true to yourself and
Yeah.
kind of have a North Star, because that's what is in the end of the day.
Yeah. I think you can be
Work,
inspired by
personal
stuff.
life.
You can. I've got this thing, and I don't know if I've ever said it publicly, but I'll happily tell you. I've never listened to a mountain bike podcast in my life, ever. Never listened to one. Because I've always had this weird thing of I don't want to be inspired by somebody else. So I don't know if that's strange or not. But again, a lot of people will be like, oh, I listened to this, whatever it could be, or the show. And I'm like, I've never heard it. Like, should probably listen to some every now and again. But honestly, dude, like I've never listened to a single podcast about mountain biking because I just don't want to ever be like, oh, that idea came from them, which is weird.
It's your personal approach by being true to yourself. What are the top 3 podcasts that you listen to?
All right. Number 1, unfortunately, I'm so sorry, but it will be Joe Rogan. I do listen to a lot of Rogan, especially because they're 3 hours long. Like, as far as minutes listened to, he is going to be up there. Whether you love him or hate him, whatever. Second, I'm going to shout out my friend. So when I said I don't listen to another mountain bike podcast, this is probably the closest, which would be Jace's podcast, which is called Gypsy Tales. I'm a big Gypsy Tales fan. Jace is also... Actually, I've overlooked Jace, going back to an earlier question when you asked me about people that have helped. Like, Jace has been a bloody good mate of mine since we've met each other. We've only met once in person, but we speak almost every day. He's doing the same thing. He's got a podcast, Gypsy Tales, which has grown exponentially as well, like probably 10x what we've done in the same amount of time, which is annoying to see, but also he deserves it. But Jace is like my North Star. He really is, like, as far as replicating and helping each other. And he started initially building out a team, editor, producer, social media guy. So we've really helped each other along that journey. And it's so good to have someone to bounce ideas off. Massive shout out to Jace. Gypsy Tales, he's up there, dude, 100%. And then third, it's a tie. It's probably going to be Modern Wisdom. Chris Williamson podcast. Big fan of that. Again, great guests. They're all quite educationally, I know, but like I love the Church of What's Happening Now, Joey Diaz podcast. That's hilarious. I like comedy stuff. I like feeling like I'm just in a room just hanging out with my friends.
Yeah.
The one that Ollie and I bonded over was called The Fighter and the Kid, which is Brian Callen, Brendan Schaub. That's how we bonded. We were like, oh, you like that? And like the early days of podcasts, you think you're the only person that knows about this show. And you're like, what, you've heard of The Fighter and the Kid? Like, what? So that's how we initially bonded. So I still listen to that, dude. Like, they've been cancelled, brought back, in so much drama, but you really feel like you're part of it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Feel like you're part of the life. I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know personally that podcast, but that's the beauty of podcasting, is that you are able to create a relationship. Like you are listening, spending a lot of time listening to that person talk. So you kind of, I guess, bond or get to know them a bit more. I had that
realization the other day. Like I was listening to Fighter and the Kid actually the other day driving, and they were talking about Brendan, one of the hosts, his son's playing baseball, and he was like, "Oh, he's like 9." He just said, "Passing." Oh, he's 9, and I was like, "I remember that kid being born. That's weird." Wow. I remember it actually happening. And then now he's playing baseball. He's 9 years old, and I've listened the whole time, twice a week. Which is pretty cool. Wow. And yet you've never met these people. They don't know you exist. Pretty cool.
Wow. That's just goes to show that if there is something of value that you find in a podcast, you want to carry on listening to them, to the hosts, to the team behind, because it brings you joy. You learn something along the way. You get distracted from day-to-day life, wherever it is. But it's a kind of
like a modern day soap opera, isn't it? Like, I don't know if your parents used to sit and watch soap operas, like over here we've got EastEnders and Home and Away or whatever.
I guess in the sense as well to the radio show, you'd sit at the because you wanted to listen to a specific radio show or like the top of the charts, or that specific show that you want to watch or see, and then you always are there every week, ready to be entertained, I think.
Totally.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of wrap our conversation into a question that I ask all of my guests.
Okay.
And it gave them the name to the podcast, which is the following. What does success look like to you?
I think about this a lot. I think it's freedom. I think that's what success looks like to me. I think it's changed a lot as I've got older. It used to be a Lamborghini on the drive, big house. Now it's the absolute polar opposite. It's a small house, which is easy to maintain, a half decent car. I had this conversation yesterday that someone else described this. I'm going to poach it from them, but success is when you can go to a restaurant, not look at the menu, not look at the prices on the menu, and pay for everyone's dinner without having to worry. And I think that's such a great way of looking at it, because ultimately that's kind of all that really matters. It's like, can you just pay your way through? I don't need all that shit these days, man. I'm not that bothered about the big fancy houses and the stuff and the this and the that and the whatever. Honestly, I think it's that and freedom. And I think I'm going to blow my own trumpet a little bit, but I had a view around 2020 of what do I want my life to look like? And I'm pretty much doing it. Pretty much. Like, it's close, dude. Like, it's close. I can pick and choose what I want to do every day, give or take. Like, I'm busy. Like, we have a lot going on. But, today's a good example. It's Monday. I'm doing a podcast with you. If I had a 9 to 5, I wouldn't be here.
Exactly, yeah.
Our fence got blown down. I fixed the fence this morning. I wanted to go to the gym this afternoon. I went to the gym this afternoon. Like, that's success. It's not all the materialistic bullshit. It's like spending time with people you love and doing the things that you enjoy doing without guilt. That's success.
So, just as actually following up on that, is that this view that you have on life now, is this informed by like your earlier struggle and as starting a business, facing the financial difficulties, and now just now being in a more settled position where you don't have to worry so much about that?
Dude, 100%. 100%. I know we didn't get into it on this episode, but just as a quick one, when I was younger, before I started the distribution company, before that I had a camper van conversion company. So we build motorhomes, and we were young, mate. We were like mid-20s. Me and my cousin started the business, and we built it to be pretty big. Like, I hate talking money, but we were making a lot, like too much money, to be honest with you. We were a bit out of control, and it was the most miserable time of my life. Like, it didn't make me any happier just because there was 7 figures in a bank account. Still miserable, still hated doing it, still didn't see my family, still was away all the time, still was depressed, to be honest, and driving around Europe. We sold all of our stuff into Sweden, Norway, Finland and Poland. So I was always driving. So all I did was drive, which is why I got into podcasts. That's literally how, because I just have to fill all these hours of driving.
Exactly.
But no, mate, not happy at all. Absolutely. All the money in the world, go do what you want, buy the expensive things, had houses and all that shit. Didn't do anything for me at all. Nothing.
That's a lesson there for everyone listening.
That's definitely changed me as I've got older. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I think it happens though, doesn't it? As you get older, you just like realize what's really important.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. It's perfect. It's kind of, I can only speak for myself. Success is always changing, but for me, it was material things when I was younger, because looking up to people that were more successful, like, oh, they have this and they have that. Oh, that's what I want to aim for. But then now that I just recently become a father, it changes. It just changes. Like, those things are like, no, it doesn't matter anymore. It's time with family that, for me, that's what matters.
Sorry, I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
So, as I've done through my journey of doing a podcast, and I could listen to certain things along the way and be like, oh, there's a moment there, or whatever. So at this point in your podcast, what's this episode, 40 something, 42, 41? I don't know.
It's 48 probably. 48 or 47.
All right. So if we added a 1 on the start of it, so around episode 148, 50s, whatever, what does it look like to you? Like, what do you want this to be?
What, the podcast? Yeah, the bike changed my life. It allowed me to clear my head, had a better mental health, and kind of has been the vehicle from kind of personal transformation. So what I want to see in 100 episodes and 200 episodes is telling stories of how the bike or people working around the bike industry have used the bike as a vehicle of transformation. Have started somewhere, and the bike has taken them completely different avenue, or taken them improve their lives in some way. And kind of through that journey, there's always learning lessons that can be used by other people. I have been learning a lot already through these 40 plus episodes, and I will carry on learning. And these learning lessons are shared with whoever wants to be listening to the podcast. So there is value in having these conversations, because it brings some kind of nuggets of information, brings some wisdom that is shared wisdom. So yeah.
Okay. Dream podcast sponsor at that point. Who is it? What brand is it?
Very good. So there's okay, right. Dream podcast sponsor. So I've done this last year, which was I heard it in another podcast, which was write what a day would look like in 10 years time. So I wrote down in 2033 what a day would look like of my life. And in that day, I wanted to be chatting, having dinner with the CEO of Specialized. Just as, I call him or her up and say, can we have dinner? And we are having dinner. So that's my dream sponsor at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Send them that clip, and I bet it'll open a door. Right?
Brilliant.
There you go.
Brilliant.
It's free. Just clip that bit there we just spoke about, you talking about a podcast and who you want to work with, and send it to Specialized. See what happens.
Very good. Well, thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Is this something you have done?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant.
Yep. Send them the link. See what happens.
Very good.
You'll be surprised.
So, kind of to wrap our conversation, there's a tradition I started on the podcast where every guest leaves a question to my next guest, not knowing who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So the question that was left for you is the following: what is your favorite bike ride? Where and why?
Perfect. I love e-biking at the moment. I'll own it. I'm an e-biker at the minute. I absolutely love it. It's the UK winter. I don't know where you are in the world.
Yeah.
UK.
London. Yeah,
Perfect.
London.
UK winter. It's miserable. It's getting dark early. You need power hour, man. You need to be out. You need to be 2 hours and back home. So I love riding from my doorstep, because I'm really lucky to live just on the edge of the Peak District. We've got amazing riding literally from my house. I like to ride out of my house, go do a loop in the Peak District, stop at a coffee shop, coffee, usually a latte, maybe a piece of cake as well. Little chill, look at the birds, sit in nature, and ride home. I love landing after a ride at my front door. It's the best thing, man. It's so sick. It's like, and the hill back home is just like a perfect manual bomb. So you can manual the whole thing, and it's just like the best way to end a bike ride. It's so sick. So yeah, that's mine, mate. I love where I live. I'm so spoiled. It's like the best riding in the world. It's on my doorstep, like literally on my doorstep. So that's the one for me, mate.
Yeah, that's how I would want to have that kind of luxury, where just get out of the house and have the perfect ride just outside.
Yeah,
one day.
one day, mate, one day.
So
I have to pitch a question.
Yes. So now it's your turn to leave a question to my next guest.
Okay.
What question would you like to leave?
Well, there was one that came to mind, and I'm hijacking it off someone, so apologies. But let's say, so this guest, you have how do I put it? You have a network of billboards around the country you live. They're massive, on the side of buildings. You can only put one sentence on them. What do you put?
Oh, brilliant. I mean, these questions are always great, but it's always a great conversation starters. Davey, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, opening the curtains of what podcast business looks like, your experience from financial struggling to where you are now, what success looks like to you. I feel invigorated by our conversation. I hope the people listening to it also feel invigorated, because it's been great.
Cool, man. I appreciate you. Yeah, let us know if you listen. It's always a nice thing if you reach out to Pedro or myself. Would love to know if you listen. Any takeaways you took away from this would be cool to always hear. I always like listening and hearing from people. Man, I appreciate you. So thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. Thank you for tuning in into this episode of Right Success. I'm your host, Pedro Couto Lopez. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find Right Success on all the podcast platforms, YouTube, Instagram. So consider giving us follow, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a review. Let us know if you enjoyed the show. Now, don't forget, this episode was brought to you by Bike Rent Manager, the ultimate tool to streamline your bike rental operations and improve customer experience at the same time. If you want to know more about Bike Rent Manager, head over to the website www.bikerentalmanager.com, where you can find more about how they can streamline your business. Until the next podcast, keep riding to your own success.